information flow through our bodies is not from chemical reactions. That would be too slow. We wouldn't be able to think fast enough to be able to communicate like we do now if it was from chemical reactions. The information flow through living things is infrared light. And
Nancy, please go ahead.
Well, as the old lady on this panel, because I was born in 1948, I have the unique remembrance of a time before when we thought we had beat the fascists, where we thought we were a generation, not so much my generation, but my parents' generation, a generation of heroes. They were called the greatest generation for a reason. That war never ended. The fascist mentality that got us in there, the evil that we thought as a country we had somehow or another won against, didn't disappear. Okay? 20,000 of the highest ranks in the German SS and military disappeared along with the scientists. Now, where those military people went, I'm not sure, but I do know the scientists came over in paperclip, and they began to formulate a structure within the very core of America. And it was a structure that was still based on fascism, was still based on the concept that they were a superior race and that humanity should serve them. It didn't go away. It infiltrated the United States. Back in 1976, I was told by an insider that they were going to develop a psionics weapon system that would be put all over, disguised as communications, in order to electromagnetically control the people. And if they wanted to, that they could destroy a group of people or an individual with this technology. That was 1976. That's 43 years ago, and I watched them build this. Nobody would listen to me. Nobody would listen to the other people out there that said, look ever since you put Wi-Fi out, you're killing the bees. The bees are what we count for the insect community. You're killing the insect community. You kill the insect community, you're going to kill all life. Nobody would listen to us. Now, what I think has happened is that all of a sudden people are being alerted to this terrible thing, 5G. Because there is nobody that can give you another, it's not safe. They can't prove it. They can't say it because it's all lies. It's not safe. It's a weapon system. It's doing what it was designed to do. Kill people. Kill this planet.
Fascinating research that you've been doing.
Well, I'm a UC Davis grad. I graduated in 1968, one of the first women in the geology department. And I came back in the 90s to do my PhD in the ancient history of the Earth's magnetic field, going back 25 million years. And then I met a very interesting man in Livermore when I was living there. I became a Livermore lab whistleblower, nuclear weapons lab, and his name was Marion Falk. And he started teaching me about radiation. And so I became an international specialist on radiation. And finally, one day, Daryl, I said, this global pollution with radiation that's killing the whole biosphere is omnicide. It's suicide, homicide, ecocide is every kind of death. But basically, it's a death across the whole earth of all living things. And finally, I said, this just cannot be an accident. And I sat down at my computer in about 6 years ago, and I Googled University of California plus weapons of mass destruction.
So we're talking about 2010.
Yes.
Roughly.
I'm sorry, it was University of California plus Skull and Bones.
Plus Skull and Bones, oh yes.
Yes.
The Russell Trust.
Yes, and that took me down a rabbit hole I'm still going down because now I'm investigating who's at the very top, who really rules the world, and I discovered it's a very, very interesting history of ancient Iranian tribes, the original Zoroastrians, and the first world Persian Empire that has controlled the world for the last 5,000 years. And so that brings us to UC Davis and what is occurring now with what was a covert presence of the Jesuits who, and Monsanto, because it's an agricultural college, and Monsanto was started by the Jesuits. And
Different.
it's completely
Today.
different. It's completely international. It's very new world order. It's part of the transhumanism movement. It's the ancient bloodlines are here too. These ancient Iranian bloodlines. Under the carpet. But I was able to lift the carpet, and it is Linda P.B. Katehi who, when I started investigating her names and her origin and her associations and just her whole history, I went, oh my God, okay, now I understand what's happening.
And just for your information, ladies and gentlemen, Linda P.B. Katei was just put on administrative leave, and I think the pretext for removing her was the fact that she had spent $170,000 of university money in order to scrub her image on social media. And then there was some issue, for those of you who don't know, there was some issue about her serving on boards and receiving cash payment for that. But Lorena is going to be drilling much deeper than that. This is the official reason why she's temporarily being put out of the picture, but it goes much deeper than that. So I thought I would provide a little bit of context there. Please.
Thank you. So Linda Katehi was hired from the University of Illinois in 2009 as Chancellor of UC Davis, the sixth Chancellor of UC Davis. Chicago, which means you're a very, very special person. Many people, like John Kerry's parents, came from Czechoslovakia through Chicago. Chicago is Rockefeller headquarters. And that's why they come specially. They're picked in other countries. They're selected and funded and brought here, and they immediately have good jobs and positions and usually part of the intelligence operation of the United States. So she came with her husband from the University of Illinois. And the University of Illinois is very interesting. She's an electrical engineer, a specialist in antennas. And her husband, Spiros, it's Seragunas, is a chemical engineer in the engineering department on the campus. And it's interesting that they're both involved in very, very new world order technologies. And she's involved in the antennas. She has 19 antenna patents before she came to UC Davis. And they are all involved with the cell phones, with switching, with integrating with smart meters and other technologies. And her husband's involved in coatings and protective coatings on metals and materials. It's sort of materials science. The Jesuit embrace, enfold, extinguish. It's the secret history of the Jesuits. And the interests behind the Jesuits, the entities that created the Jesuits during the Renaissance in Italy, it was none other than Alessandro Farnese, a Persian. From ancient Persia, his family came through Cappadocia in eastern Turkey, eventually to Italy, and they founded the first 10 Etruscan cities in Italy. And when those were razed, they destroyed them and they created the Roman Empire. The Romans, the Etruscans, the Holy Roman Empire, they're all Iranians, they're all Persians, it's all Persian blood. Italians are Iranians. Their practices, their beliefs, their food, their clothing attire. The Pope, for instance, wears a papal tiara dome, the papal dome, which is called the papal tiara. Well, that's what men in charge of tribes in Central Asia wear. They wear those very large domed hats. And some of the women do also if they're a leader of the community. And then the red slippers that the Pope wears, those are Central Asian slippers. You see them in India a lot and in Asia. So there are many cultural ties and legends and religious practices that indicate over and over and over again that the Italians are really Iranians. So you see this fingerprint of Iranian DNA everywhere. And 14,000 years ago, DNA studies of a particular Iranian tribe indicate there was a mutation in the DNA, and it caused different extremes of albinoism. So the most extreme expression is red hair and blue eyes, light blue eyes. And then more moderate expressions are blonde hair, green eyes, hazel eyes, gray eyes. You see a lot of Afghanis with gray eyes. And it has to be from both parents. It's a recessive gene. So that really got me started.
The Kate, where does someone like her fit into this grand scheme?
Well, I had to understand why she was brought to UC Davis. Why
Right.
was she hired?
We know about the antennas.
Yes, and then I discovered she and her husband were both working in technologies that were very relevant to the New World Order agenda. So that was interesting. Then I started looking at her name and the origin of the name. So her name is Linda, which is probably an American name that she took on when she came here, P.B. Katehi. And Pisti is what the P stands for. Her first name is Pisti, her real name. And that's a Hungarian name for crowned or victorious. And that name was given to royal babies only.
She's royalty.
She's royalty.
She's of a royal bloodline.
Yes. And the Hungarians are from Central Asia. The early Greek, that word pisti in early Greek is Stephanos, Stephen. So that's what it means in all the languages of Europe and ancient languages of Europe. But that's not her name. It's Pisti, which is Hungarian. The Hungarians came from Central Asia. So that was a first name probably in her family, but it's a man's name, which indicates even more that it was an important family name. Even though she was a girl, she may have been the firstborn, and they gave that name to her. That's what happened to me. Loren is a man's name. And then Pistis appears in Gnostic texts, which are related to Zoroastrian, the ancient Iranian religion, in the 3rd to 4th century A.D. And then Pistici is in a province of Mentera in southern Italy, and the ancient name is Basilicata. Basilica. the churches, grand
Sure,
churches, and so forth. Now, Pistichi, the chi means the bloodline or the stock of the Pisti people or the Pisti tribe. So there's her link there with Pisti to Basilicata, and her second middle name is Basile, which refers to Basilicata. Basile is a last name. Basilicata is it's in the southern part of Italy, as I said, and it refers to basilica and these ancient, very, very grand churches. Now, and they have 10 bloodline families that sit on a council, and they're the ones who advise the Jesuits. The Jesuits work for the Iranian bloodlines, and the Jesuits were created by Alessandro Farnese, who became Pope Paul III in the Renaissance, and Fidel Castro is pure Iranian ancient bloodline, and he's directly descended from Pope Paul III.
Okay, you're going to have to unpack that one for us.
Them. And they've never stopped retaliating against me since then. That was 1989. But 91. But I'm glad that I've had this experience. It's been hell in a lot of ways, but you have to be in their house. You have to live in their house to know who they are and what they are, and so that when you leave, you know how to challenge them. You know how to expose them, because what they're doing is immoral, it's illegal, it's insane. They are destroying this planet without our permission, without informing us, and without even having a good reason for doing it. They're just doing it because they can.
Yale University. All these bloodlines control information, scholarship, and every single aspect, and sciences, of course, almost every single aspect of our lives that shape our world.
And so I started investigating, well, what is the University of California? Why are they breaking all these laws and everything? Well, it turns out that Dwight and Gilman started the land grant, the U.S. land grant program, and that was to have the U.S. government allot land in each state to build a state university.
This is the Morrill Act,
Yes,
correct?
that's
Yeah.
UC Berkeley, which was the first Berkeley campus. So they were very intimately involved with the University of California. And then they went on to establish the other state universities and colleges. But from the very beginning, all of these institutions were exempt from state laws.
This is what I found out.
Yes,
They are a government within a government,
that's right.
a sovereign entity.
And they actually were set up to benefit the oligarchs and industrialists and so forth who went to the Ivy League colleges.
Sure.
So the state universities were set up to train workers for the ruling elite. And so you need to understand the history and the ancient history of issues that you're involved with before you can ever really understand what is really happening.
And as a footnote, President Gilman, who was the first president to really put his stamp on the University of California system, was a member of the Order of Death. He was
Yes.
a Skull and Bones person.
They were both Skull and
They're
Bones.
both Skull and Bones
Yes.
people, and perhaps we can range into this area a little bit later, because there's an occult overlay when we're talking about this.
Absolutely, very, very much so. Using government data.
Sure. And published books by
Yes.
quote unquote reputable scholars
Right.
who are always just slightly unable to complete the picture
Right.
purposely,
Right.
because the academic profession does not allow you to fully bring all these different elements of knowledge and information together
Right.
in a comprehensive whole that really gives away the game.
Right.
This is why what we're doing today here is
Yes.
so exciting to me.
17 antenna patents. And these antennas now, waveforms, are the new mechanism to enslave society, to take over the whole entire world. That's what HARP is. There are HARP bases all over Antarctica, and that's in training the Earth's magnetic field. And the animal studies for mind control were done here and are still being done here on the UC Davis campus. And I remember in the 60s, the students would come back from that secret facility, and they were students who did work studies. So they worked in the monkey colony, and they said the monkeys have the top of their heads cut off and their wires coming out of them, and they can transmit waveforms to them and make them just climb up and down in their cage all day long. They can command them to do anything they want to. And it sounded so out there that I didn't pay very much attention to it. But now I understand as I see this all unfolding and other experiences I had.
Speaking of the literature, ladies and gentlemen, you might want to check Delgado.
Yes.
Called Toward a Psycho-Civilized Society.
Yes.
And you have photographs in there with the
Yes.
monkeys, the simians,
Yes.
with part of their skulls removed. And I think the technology was called the stem sievers.
Yes.
So this is decades old technology.
Yes.
Who knows what they're doing now? But you're saying that the antenna technology that Linda,
That
quote
Linda-
unquote, PB Katehi,
Yes.
is responsible for is integral to this new phase in mind control, or behavioral control?
It's the delivery system.
The delivery system. Okay.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
And Delgado also wrote a book, The Biology of Aggression. And so they can use these frequencies to cause food riots. They can use these frequencies as in Rwanda, that big, huge massacre in Rwanda. Those were Russian, Ukrainian oligarchs who sent thugs down to Rwanda. The whole place had been wired up with antennas. These guys had been hooked up to computers, and they were programmed before they went down to Rwanda to carry out the slaughter. And it was plain and simply so that the Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs could steal all the wealth of the colonists. And the order was to slaughter all of them, every single white person, and steal all of their wealth, go into the banks, strip their bank accounts, take all their securities from safety deposit boxes. And the Africans there had no money, so they were used to cover the slaughter of the white people. All of the UC campuses now, the street corners have been taken up. They've put surveillance and other technology packages into the ground. They dug down 5 feet, and then they cemented it in so that it can't be removed. And it's hooked up to the street lights, to the smart meters, to cell phones. It's all integrated now. That's what Katehi's technology is about. It's about integrating all of that. So you get a huge array of antennas that are all integrated, and you control everything.
So the HARP model has been regionalized or localized.
It's been localized. It's been made more granular. It's more powerful, but it's more miniaturized. It's gotten smaller and smaller and more efficient, and had a bigger and bigger impact.
Okay.
So it's a creeping mechanism for controlling humanity.
Years ago, perhaps even 10 years ago, I began to see a 180-degree shift in intelligence level, intellect, analytical ability, expressive ability, intellectual
Yes.
ability, of course, I mentioned.
Yes.
And in attending that, I also saw a gradual acceleration of hostility and
Yes.
anger.
Yes.
And much of this has been directed towards myself
Yes.
and towards other faculty people.
That's right.
And I'm reading that this has been taking place coast to coast, north to south, at different universities. Well, yeah, you alluded to that.
Yes.
That's why I
Yes.
interjected that, because
Yes.
I'm interested in masking.
But
Because
the Middle East, these Mesopotamians, all of Eurasia, we know now from DNA studies done over the last 5 years, especially by Russia, all of Eurasia was settled by Central Asians.
Please talk a little bit about the DNA studies, and I
Yes.
assume that these studies are coming out of the Human Genome Project, right? Am I-
No, they wouldn't be coming out of the
Okay.
Human Genome Project, which is American. They're coming out of Russian
Okay.
scientific research.
All right, because
Yes.
this DNA, from our conversations,
Yes.
this DNA research provides the scientific backing
Mm-hmm.
that helps support this hypothesis or this theory in the making. It's irrefutable. It's ironclad, and I think this is probably the most important development in this type
Right.
of research. It's hard science. It's not fantasy. It's
Yes.
supported by
Right.
definitive DNA analysis, and you can
Yes.
trace the distribution
Yes.
of these different peoples, these different
Yes.
tribal groups, and
Yes.
how their culture and their religious practices migrated
Yes.
across the world, and how they have been transmitted to us down here to 2016 are embodied
Right.
in people like Linda
Right.
P.B. Katehi.
Right.
Please.
And so these ancient Iranian tribes moved into Europe and the Middle East. So the Basques are ancient Iranian bloodlines.
Is there a DNA
Yes, from
report?
the DNA.
Okay.
Yes. The Berbers in North Africa in the Altai Mountains, the Basques, the Berbers, and the Kurds all came from the Hittites.
And
The
there's
Hit-
DNA research on
Yes,
that?
this is from
Okay.
DNA research and also language similarities.
All right.
And
So
blood,
it's a multidisciplinary effort.
And
But
blood
the thing
types.
is, these disciplines are all compartmentalized.
they're
but
compartmentalized.
You're achieving
Yes.
a grand
Into-
synthesis of all this.
Yes, synthesized it.
Okay.
I've distilled the information
Right.
into a picture that makes sense.
Okay.
And it's all internally consistent as well. And then I realized they have very, very strict breeding programs. And for instance, with the royal families, the popes had to always give permission for two members of a royal family to marry. For instance, especially if they were on the throne. And there could be no relatives or family association for 7 generations, or in order to marry. And when the Roman empires collapsed, the Western Empire collapsed first, the Eastern Empire collapsed in the 1500s, late 1400s. These ruling families wanted to reassemble the Habsburg Empire. Remember, the Roman Empire became the Habsburg Empire, and they wanted to recreate that Roman Empire, and they did it by intermarrying very closely related people, but they had to all have land that were pieces of part of the Holy Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was so much inbreeding in the Habsburgs. The Jesuits did it, actually. And they did it, one particular Habsburg prince, who was to be the emperor, Holy Roman Empire, had so much inbreeding that recently Germany did DNA studies on the whole Habsburg bloodlines. And they said he had the DNA of someone who had been the product of sex between a sister and a brother.
That's Egyptian, isn't it?
That's Egyptian.
That's a dynastic
yes.
pairing.
Yes.
So what you're saying also, before we leave
Mm-hmm.
this point or move on past it, is that certain physical traits are also passed on.
Yes,
that
they are.
They're telltale
Yes.
physical traits because of this breeding program, including
Yes.
mouth structure,
Yes.
in the case of Fidel, at the
Yes.
brow, the bridge, the nose
Yes.
structure.
Yes, intelligence, beauty. There are many, many characteristics that they're breeding for, but it can also be a way to wage war. So instead of waging all these wars to reunite the Habsburg Empire. The war was in bed.
Uh-huh.
So they did it through inbreeding.
The
Well,
empire.
Well,
Or
after about
consolidate it.
after about 200 years, a bloodline will just die out because they're infertile from so much inbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would just take a cadet family, one of the other branches, and they'd plug them in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the same bloodline. But if you look at the Habsburgs, they all have strawberry blonde hair. It's reddish blonde. And there's a Pope, Orsini, who had reddish blonde hair, and I think he was involved in the Habsburg line.
Okay.
Yes.
Fine. But
Yes.
how do these bastards, in this strict term,
Yes.
how do they figure into this ruling system?
Well, one of them is one of those bastards is Hitler. He was a
Rothschild.
Rothschild.
Sure.
An-
I
another
thought that was just an apocryphal.
No.
It's,
another
okay.
one is Bill Clinton's mother, who was the illegitimate child of Winthrop Rockefeller, who was governor of Arkansas.
Arkansas.
That's why Clinton was president, and now Hillary Clinton. She's actually, her middle name was Rodham. What I looked it up, and it was shortened from Brodowski, and she's from a Jewish family in Brodowski, Poland.
Mhm.
And
Wasn't that her stepfather? Or her natural, her
No, that's-
biological father?
Rodonsky was her
Her
natural
bo-
father.
okay.
Yeah.
Because she also had a stepfather who was Jewish, I
Uh-huh.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's
Okay.
Eastern European.
So they were bred.
They were bred.
They were
That
set
was
up.
a breeding.
Okay.
Yes, that was a breeding program.
And just out of curiosity, because this is in the news lately, there's some talk that Chelsea Clinton was the offspring of Webster Hubbell and Hillary Clinton. Who was Webster Hubbell? I know.
I don't know.
I know he was an advisor to the Clinton family,
Oh.
but she's a dead ringer for Webster Hubbell.
Oh, well then
She's not the child of Bill Clinton. in other
nobody
words.
cares in those families. They just breed who they're told to breed to.
So why was Bill Clinton sterile, or he was unable to breed?
They didn't
with,
they didn't
with-
want that bloodline. They wanted the other one.
They wanted the Radinsky one, bloodline.
No, they wanted the Hubble.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure out.
I don't know
You
who he is.
Okay.
So king colonies all over the Ukraine on the rivers for thousands of years, and in Turkey. There are redheads all over Turkey also.
Sure. All the way down through Rome, right?
yes.
The Varangian Guard.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
And so all of these were ancient Iranians with that mutation who went into Scandinavia to a more comfortable, a colder climate. And then they came down through the Mediterranean on their ships and colonized the Mediterranean and Ukraine and Turkey and the Crimea.
So this marriage between Grace Kelly, Irish Catholic, Irish American, and Prince Rainier of Monaco was really a homecoming.
Iranian bloodlines.
It's a genetic homecoming.
It's a yes. It was
Right.
Iranian bloodlines.
And you had the power of the entire world focused on this. This was the biggest wedding until Princess Diana married Charles. This was
That's
like
right.
a world historical
right.
event. It was a fairy tale Princess Bride
Yes.
type of scenario.
Yes.
All right. So you
Now-
had all that energy focused on the consummation of these
Right.
these lines that were
Right.
coming back
And
together
they-
and fusing.
They keep rebreeding the ancient stock, the chi in Italian, like let's see, like
Medici.
Medici. Yeah, chi means the stock, the bloodline you're from, or the tribe. It means DNA is what it means,
Right.
and it's always through the female. It's not through the male. It's through the female, and they also breed their animals through the female. That's the most important breeding in the breeding pair. The female is the most important, and it's because the DNA and the RNA in the mitochondria is separate from the DNA and RNA in the nucleus of the cell. And it's the mitochondria that provide all the energy for the body and body functions. So in the organs that use the most energy, the highest percentage of mitochondria are in those cells, and it's the brain cells and the heart cells. So when radiation passes through a cell, it can miss the nucleus, but it can't miss the mitochondria. And so when it damages the DNA in the mitochondria and the RNA, then you have all of these brain diseases and heart diseases which have escalated. They've gone up exponentially since the nuclear age started with the dropping of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let's take a brief break so that we can refresh ourselves, and then we'll restart for part 2. Thank you, Lorraine. This has been a great conversation. Katehi here, I'm just going to call her PB Katehi, not Linda, her cover name. PB Katehi came to the faculty meeting, and she gleefully, gloatingly announced that she was going to move on these students. She told them the revelation of the method, what she was going to do to it. So what I'm saying here is that there was malice aforethought involved. She had planned to do it.
This is the spillover of Urban Shield. That was the kickoff. The oppression and suppression of now the universities.
So was there a ritualistic component to this?
Absolutely.
She needed to bloody her sword
Yes.
to earn her bones,
Yes.
to get the little teardrop
Yes.
tattoo
Yes.
under her eye.
She had to kill the children.
She had to kill the golden bear,
Yes.
kill the Americans,
Yes. Kill the dream.
kill the dream.
Kill the freedom. Kill the hope. Kill the future. The Servitors of Empire Studies in the Dark Side of Asian America. And this is by Daryl Hamamoto. And there is so little written by Asians or non-Asians about the Asian players in all of this.
Absolutely. And secret societies.
And secret societies.
And the role of the Jesuits in Asia,
Yes.
including Japan,
That's right.
Philippines,
That's right.
Vietnam.
Yes, yes.
That's where I'm taking
And
this.
they came with the Portuguese explorers, and they were installed in Japan in the 1500s.
Then they were kicked out
Then they were
in
kicked out.
1587,
Yes.
which allowed Japan to flourish
Yes.
and to develop to become a very powerful country
Right.
that the Jesuits never forgave them for.
That's right. And so please read this. Please give it as a gift to people. Please recommend it because it's very, very informative, and it's a huge missing piece of the history of our nation.
And even more importantly, please support me in my battle with my Department of Asian American Studies, which
Yes.
took me out of 3 courses this past winter quarter.
That's right.
Because they do not want the students to get this type of information.
That's right.
With the full backing of Linda Katehi, Dean Susan Kaiser, and all the different Jesuits that are in these power positions that are really running the show here at the University of
Eichenbach.
California.
Eichenbach.
Yes, this guy Carl,
Eichenbach.
is it Eichenbach? Yeah.
Eichenbach.
He fits the profile. Right?
He's
So
the co-chancellor.
he's the co-chancellor, and I announced this
Yes.
at my faculty meeting this past week, and of course my colleagues scoffed at it and laughed at it. Oh, he's just her handler in her press. Said no, he's he's the co-chancellor.
Yeah.
And then one of my colleagues,
Yeah.
who's beginning to see that I'm not the crackpot that
Yeah.
because they try to paint you as being crazy and a
Yes.
crackpot. She looked it up in her computer in real time as I was saying this, and she said, "Oh my gosh, he's right.
Yes.
He is the co-chancellor."
Yes.
So the point here, it's not about me. It's just look behind the veil, look behind the curtain, and see who's really in power and how the system functions. And there are more and more people, and I predict there's going to be a renaissance in academic and scholarly literature in general that's going to be fueled to a large extent by the innovative research of my colleague, my dear friend, Lorraine Murray.
Yes.
And that's what the enterprise is all about.
Yes.
That's what the human experience is about.
Yes.
This is how we've been able to survive and excel.
This swing to Satanism is converting these institutions into places where they're bringing foreign students here, they're bringing out-of-state students here, and they're training them to occupy their own countries, to overthrow their own governments, and to act as saboteurs in corporations and places where they go for employment in the future. And so it's destroying the fabric, the social fabric, and the economic fabric of their countries.
We have been warned, ladies and gentlemen.
Everything that every ICNI or PC, and it's perfectly safe. These large tanks, these tie-in tanks, MIMO tanks, they're only operating on 20% of that potential. That's if they were fully deployed for 5G. So there's an 80% or thereabouts, an 80% power density output from that transmitter system, from these radiators, that what's it for? And I believe, I'm pretty well, looking at the design of the small dielectric lens antennas and how they can actually operate in the vertical, I first thought it was, for some over the horizon weapon system, because obviously you can bounce these weapons off the ionosphere. There's talk about these 20,000 small satellites that you can put up there, so you can bounce them off them. I haven't seen the satellites. I'd like to get if I could actually have a look at one, and then I'd understand, because basically a satellite's just a mirror in the sky. And it's the ground-based transmitter that fires a signal up and you get a reflection down. That's what satellites are in the main. And I'd like to see these ones. So I'm thinking, it's an over-the-horizon weapon. They've built this massive array in the UK. They're going to attack New York or attack a city somewhere else in Moscow or something like that. Now I'm starting to change my view due to the size and the output of these devices. This equipment could potentially punch a hole through the ionosphere and break through all of the cosmic radiation onto the Earth to actually just destroy everything and turn the whole Earth into, terraform it so it looks something like Mars. Because it's starting to look pretty interesting, the capability of this equipment, considering, if they just want to kill us, if they just want to wipe out humanity, then there's a bit of overkill there. That's what I'm starting to look at from a technical perspective.
The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Important to understand what the 5G is doing and what they say it's doing. We're told on the IEEE beamforming document that this technology cooked your eyes like eggs in World War II. And you all need to understand these are military weapons. These are assault frequencies. If you garner nothing more than that, that's what you need to know. It's microwave radiation warfare. This is what this is.
wayward secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.